Hi everybody, welcome to this briefing. Really exciting topic. We're talking about AI in the TeamsRoom Pro portal, what it's capable of, kind of some thoughts about why it was developed and where it's going. I think AI as kind of an operational assist for IT is a really interesting conversation. So excited to get into this one. Alvin, Andrew, maybe you guys could introduce yourselves and your role. Maybe start with you, Alvin.
Yeah, so I am a product manager at Microsoft, specifically on the Pro Management Portal team. I've worked on a whole host of things in the Pro Management Portal, but for the purposes of today, the most important conversation is the newly released AI assistant. So,
Awesome, thanks. And Andrew?
Yeah, sure thing. I'm Andrew George. I'm a principal software engineer in the device management space, and have actually been with the device management and MMR since the original days.
Awesome. So, that opens up a whole bunch of conversations we could have, but let's stick to the AI one today. I think this is so interesting. I mean, a lot of the AI conversation is obviously about end users, having new capabilities, and particularly like knowledge worker, Teams features, Copilot, obviously as an assistant. But I think the potential for AI in operational tooling, particularly in IT, is really exciting and really powerful. And I talk to customers regularly on the podcast who have 1,000+ Teams rooms, and that's before we consider all the additional devices and maybe even BYOD. But maybe I'll start with you, Alvin. Maybe give us some thinking about why AI in the Pro Portal and what the initial thinking was, because you've been working on this for a while now.
yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, yeah, the fruits of the labor are a result of many, many months, actually closer to a year worth of effort. And something I definitely want to cover is the fact that the pace of the evolution of the tech in AI is moving so quickly that we almost have to build and rebuild so often, and Andrew can attest to that, how many iterations we had to go through. But really, the rationale, and one thing that I, especially as the product manager on this project, was very sensitive to was building AI for the sake of AI. We don't want to just do that. We wanted to actually think about the scenarios deeply and figure out where AI could actually add value. And so, if anything, what you're seeing right now is the very foundational layer of what we're planning to introduce and build over the long run. And so that kind of starts with the basics, right? Of can it answer fundamental questions about this problem space in particular, and can we do a better job of explaining things with our AI assistant versus the generic chatbots out there like ChatGPT and so on, right? And so, of course, as LLMs, those function great. Those scrape over and reason over all the data available on the public web. But could we do better than that, right? Ideally, ours should be a specialist on this topic and be, in a way like humans, a subject matter expert for the space of Teams device management, right? And so that's why you're seeing the very basic layer of the cake, if you will, with the AI assistant being able to answer questions like knowledge-based questions that we're basically using RAG over Microsoft Docs. But more importantly, and that's why we wanted to at least kind of get our foot out the door with something more than just that chatbot that can only generate responses over docs. We wanted to add value with something that we call the data analyst, right? And this is where you'll be able to see answers, and you'll be able to ask questions about your own data, right? And so asking questions like inventory-based questions and being able to dynamically on the fly have an AI assistant understand your question and extract the correct data that you want from that on the fly is something that we're really going to be leaning into more as we go on. But yeah, so I think that's kind of the rationale that we have here is like we want to be a specialist.
And that makes sense, because I mean, I'm super interested to dive into how it changed over the year of planning as well, because we had Sandy on the podcast recently do it, and she was involved in the channel agency. She said exactly the same thing, like when they started and what you could do versus when they launched. Like, obviously the LLM tech and various other bits have developed during that period. But yeah, getting into the data is really interesting, isn't it? Because actually, if you think about as a user, kind of your competition is actually just generalist copilot that can also reach out to the internet and answer questions about rooms. And that started off 2 years ago, like hit and miss. It's got much better with things like GPT-5, but the secret sauce is obviously being able to reach into your room data. Andrew, maybe that's a good time to jump to you and talk about how it lines up technically, because I guess that's where some of the power is and is going to come, is it having your inventory data and your logs and your errors and issues and all that kind of data.
Yeah, and definitely like when we started this, just to like put in context, when we started working on the analyst part, we started working actually with some other teams who were doing similar approaches in Azure, and for where Alvin's going now is a career copilot too, um, is working on I think it was GPT 2.5. So the
Wow.
capability of what we worked on, and we
I was going to say
essentially,
night and day, but it's probably more than that.
yeah,
It's huge leaps, isn't it?
yeah, it's huge leaps. But the fundamental thing that hasn't changed since then, and anyone who's used LLMs for anything, is context is the biggest thing to manage. And so when we're thinking about swaths of data, every assistant has run into this across like admin copilots. Is it's one thing if you have, 10 to 20 rooms, we can generally have an LLM deal with that amount of data. But when you're talking about um, a lot of our customers have, 10,000. We have
Yeah, yeah.
15,000 devices, and we're adding more and more devices to the portal. It's just
And
a vast,
there's an inverse of value there. Actually, the bigger the estate, the more value the AI potentially can bring to the
right,
customer.
100%. And so we're like, hey, that was the first problem. Is like we need to try some different methods to actually equip an agent to go through and be able to parse this data like a human would. And then the other kind of issue we ran into is we had to be very careful. LLMs are really good now, but they're still notoriously bad at being one, consistent, and two, good at math. So a lot of our tests were like, hey, if we have to ask it do any sort of summarization or any sort of aggregation or browsing or exploration, we had to first build all the systems on top of our data first for even a system to be able to do it. And then equip our agents with the ability to take your question and infer on our database and go across the entire data estate that is our rooms. Because I'm sure a lot of people know we have a dream where like all the data that's in PMP, right, we can use to empower customers and what they need. Because every customer has different needs, right? And that's the great thing about an assistant is it gives us kind of this universal interface, right? Is before is like, hey, we can build report one, we can build report two, but there will always be, kind of behind the curve. Whereas if we can give customers this access, like here's all of your data that we've access to, there's much more return on that investment and value that they get out of like, hey, I want to know about this one, very bespoke property on this device that only like matters
Yeah,
for my environment because of some network stack I have and I want to be able to report on, hey, what are all the devices that signed out this weekend based off of that? This gives us the flexibility and kind of that interface to be able to expose that to customers. And back to the technical things, it's ever evolving. We're ever adding data to it. The big thing now is just refining and experimentation. And something else I think it's interesting that we as engineers and as working with customers and like PM is in the device space, and I'm sure everyone listening will relate to this somehow. A lot of LLMs aren't aware of all the shorthand we use, and we use an incredible amount of shorthand. And so our biggest optimization thing, especially,
also all the rebrands, like
yes, all the
collab bars, MTR. Well, I was sending some examples to Alvin, and I was like MTRI, MTROW. Like that's what I would say.
yeah, definitely, and it'll keep changing in the future too, right?
Yeah,
Because that's just the nature of the industry we're in, and I think that's the one thing that we spend a lot of time on with this, working with this agent is it has to have all that tribal knowledge you do. If you're like, hey, you know, give me all the MTRW rooms and that are picking each like shorthand, like we use Cloud Bar, Mercury, like we have the brand names and then we have
yeah,
shorthand. We'll say Logi instead of Logitech, right? So we have to essentially maintain and keep all this tribal knowledge that's both customer specific and also like industry specific. like MTR versus like Microsoft Teams Room on Windows, right? How does
Mm.
the agent know when I'm filtering it? What is that, right? And so that with also if you're searching on groups, you might have like an exec group and you have a shorthand. You're like, hey, you know, this group name, exec room group. But it might have something very specific like Puget Sound, building 3 executive like floor. But you'll just say,
Yeah.
hey, give me everything in the exec group. So how do we also let the agent understand that shorthand so you don't have to like type exactly like this is the group I want information for. And so making it ergonomic has been probably our biggest investment lately. And that's where we think um, we're really investing a lot in making it more self-sustaining. So it kind of learns what the shorthand is, and over time, we'll be able to adapt to that and become better the more you use it.
And that's really interesting, that challenge. And it's interesting. The math thing is that like the first use cases I jumped to was like, how many of these, how many of those,
Yeah.
like so some of that stuff you were saying, you've kind of like had to reshape the data to kind of, it's kind of a choice whether you give the LLM more cogs and do reasoning and kind of try and hope the
Right.
LLM gets better and solve the problem versus shaping the data ready. I guess there's a bunch of questions you can probably typically know you're going to get questions of how many of these, how many of those. So you've
100%.
been kind of
Yeah,
pre-shaping some of the data ready for that.
and actually,
Yeah.
the data analyst right now today is more like when you ask some of those questions, it's more of a count rather than a hey, do this arithmetic of this times x times y,
Yeah.
give me some answer, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Uh,
so it's been both shaping just the context to it. It's shaping the data. But I think the trickiest thing with anyone who uses LLM is it'll be, and even in testing this, it'll be right 99% of the time. So we have to put a lot of investment to fix that 1% of the time. So because it'll be like, oh, you have 20 rooms, you have 20 rooms. And if we run our evals and we run it, 20, 30 times, it'll be right. It'll be like, oh, yep, you have 20 rooms. And then someone will just go test it. And because of the stochastic nature of an LLM, it'll be like, oh, you have 36 rooms. We're like, wait,
yeah,
what?
yeah,
That's not right. Um, so it's
yeah.
definitely an adventure and constantly adding guardrails to it. So POCs are quick and making it consistent is really the long tail of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We do different thing, but we use LMs to go over all the message center data and pull out information and stuff like that. And we found we had to we just run everything twice and check it against each other, and that's how we've solved it. But the cogs of that for us aren't a big deal, and the benefit is there. But I guess your kind of scale, you've got to think about the cogs of the LLM and what model you use and how much engine you put into that as well.
100%. 100%. And it's an interesting approach too, especially with the trend where everyone's going, oh, 100% AI, right? Throw AI at everything. Is some of the best success we found is when we mix a lot of our approaches with traditional models, like, and try not to be blind to like, hey, LLM can do so much, is you don't have to do everything in LLM. Like Alvin mentioned too, is we found ourselves to get a large part of the way towards our even, like MVPs for the data analyst assistant. A lot of it was good old traditional making sure we have high quality data, making sure our docs were formatted correctly, right?
Yeah,
When you're asking an LM to, kind of summarize a TSG, if your docs that you're publishing already aren't at a high quality bar and a human can't understand it, an LM's not going to be able to understand it either.
yeah.
And the
It's a
data is the
really
same way. We're like, hey, why did we name this column this way? Like no one would understand this. And so it was a good opportunity to realize that, hey, a lot of this we can improve quality just by, tightening our discipline on our day-to-day items in traditional engineering too.
Oh, I'm great to hear it's having a positive knock on or pressure on the docs because that's a hard challenge in its own right to keep those up to date. But I've heard the same use case as well for things like, people ragging over HR policies and then asking questions and
Right.
realizing the policy doesn't even mention the thing that you're like, it's not the LLM's fault, the raw data wasn't there in the
Right.
first place.
Yeah, and we actually had that specifically for our product documentation, where in our testing before releasing the public preview, there were a couple of cases where we tested questions and we're like, the response is pretty consistent from the LLM, and we go check the docs. And this is actually something that's kind of unique about our experience is the way that we cite our sources. And especially when it's coming from the data analyst and all that stuff. And this makes it a lot easier for our users as well to audit the responses that they're getting and evaluate themselves how trustworthy the answer that they got from our AI assistant is, because our sources are very, very clear, and that was an intentional design decision. But back to my example, there, I can't even remember what question it was, but it was actually kind of a crazy to see the pace at which an LLM could update. And so what had happened was, we were in the course of our testing before the public preview, it was clearly missing some information, and because of the sources being listed out there, we were able to go, oh, it's pulling from these docs. That is correct. It's pulling from the correct doc. So we go check them, and then it's like, actually, the way that we phrase this question and the way that our documentation is written, of course, the LLM isn't really quite getting the answer. So I
Yeah.
was able to then go in, correct the docs that day, submit it in GitHub, and the next day it got pushed to prod. And then the following day, we were able to retest the answer without changing any of our code, and the AI assistant, and suddenly the answer was a lot better. So that was like really pivotal to me in really understanding the garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, it's really it'll be really interesting with the docs in the future how much we're writing docs with the LLM in mind as much as the human in mind, if not more the LLM, because probably the first interface is going to be ask an AI assistant whatever it is, and the fallback is going to be, okay, now I'm going to trawl the docs. So thinking about the various ways the LLM will pick up that information and process it is interesting docs wise.
Yeah. And then the other thing I want to touch on there in particular is, I know, and I've seen commentary about this, but it's like, why do you guys build an AI assistant within PnP when you have like ChatGPT or Copilot accessible and it's pretty easy? And it's like, yes, but you don't have to exit your workflow. So, for example, if you have a question in situ in the Pro portal, then you can ask it right then and there. So there is a convenience aspect to that for sure.
Do you feel like the bar is higher for you in terms of the answers have to be right? I feel like there's a good level of, when I'm using Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, I've got a natural cynicism because it's grounding over the whole internet effectively and doing some search. Like, I feel like when I go into a product, I'm expecting the product to have kind of vetted the answer a little bit.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that I kind of alluded to that earlier, where, if we think about where things are with AI chatbots, I think it's fair to assume that ChatGPT and Copilot, for example, are great generalists, and that's where there we see value. And I think a lot of companies and products see value in creating specialist agents, because it should be the subject matter expert, the AI subject matter expert for the respective product that you're building. So I would expect the expectation from customers and users to be higher in those contexts.
Yeah. And I guess
Yeah.
there's like, this is the beginning of a journey as well, isn't it? So like, I'd love to sort of get your thoughts on, obviously you can't share very specifics, but like, it feels like that the first thing I want to do with an AI agent is be like, well, it's ProPortal's surfacing me an issue. It's telling me the recommended thing is to reboot. You know the calendar in theory. You know the system in theory. Like, you know how to reboot a system. Obviously, there's a leap of faith there for different customers on how proactive it can get. But I guess you're thinking about the potential of like it being a bit more proactive.
Absolutely, yeah. So I can touch on that a little bit, and then depending on how much we want to go in, and I know we could cut some of this, so this is great. But no, so absolutely, what you just touched on in terms of what you've effectively described is agentic flows, like workflows, and absolutely, we're working steadfastly on that to be able to do those things that you just described. Where, well, we have all the information, can we act on it? And I think the answer to this is an unequivocal yes. It's a matter of time, not a matter of if.
Yeah.
And so we definitely have those things in the works right now. I won't I hesitate to describe the exact scenarios, because
Yeah, no, we can keep it general. It's
Yeah,
nice to know it's what's being
yeah, I
talked
think
about.
it's fair enough too, because I have had a lot of feedback that, just to your comment, right? It's like, hey, you do have all this information. Can we do this? And I think we can agree that yes, that is a technically feasible scenario, and also an interesting problem and a lot of opportunity. Because like you alluded to for the data analyst agent, is there's a lot of things we can do for a room or two, but it's a whole nother thing when we look at, hey, if there's an outage and we have to run some sort of agentic flow on, you know, 1 or 2 million devices, it's a whole nother scale that we have to think about. And then also there's some nuance, and we'll see this with all agents across the industry, right? Is like different people are comfortable with different levels of
Yeah, it feels
autonomy
like
given to an
absolutely
agent,
you're going to need
right?
config and levels of like this is only ever going to be read only versus simple actions versus entire estate actions, and yeah, people's appetite are going to be different in different organizations for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, and
And
we thought
so
about that.
yeah, and then another thing we think about too is the transparency of that, right? Is when we look into that world, I'm going to try to speak in, general terms here, is there's a lot to know once I do give that trust, right? Once I've decided my level of comfort with giving this essentially this model or the statistical like model autonomy, how do I one make sure that it confirms the guardrails I've given it. It sticks to those guardrails. And just like anything else that is going, performing any sort of reasoning or any sort of inference, the less black box you can make it, the better you can build trust, and also the better feedback you have into the system. In a world where we'd want to build these flows, if you think about, let's take AI and all of the, automation out of it. If you have a team and you're going to like, hey, my organization is expanding, I'm going to hire a new support team. You're going to want to make sure that not only do you have that support team, but you have the mechanisms in place for it to be self-improving as well. Like, hey, your engineers should be growing, they should be learning, they should be updating documentation. They should be learning when they make a mistake, they should have be able to collaborate with other agents and learn from that mistake and improve. And so really when we think about those kind of scenarios in IT environment, especially with agents, it's really the same kind of thoughts as you take in organizational planning. We're just doing it with agents. And for anything that's well defined, agents are at the point where, for really simple things, they're pretty good at rule following if you give them those boundaries. But you have to design the right boundaries, you have to design the right context, and you need to make sure that there's very deterministic gates for it.
Yeah.
So a lot of opportunity, but also at enterprise scale, there's a lot of considerations that we've definitely been thinking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. The privilege and the challenge, I guess, of Microsoft is you're you're working on an AI agent in a pro portal that the team also own, on a product the team also own, so you can influence the whole chat. Like that's a big thing. Multiple teams, long conversation, right? But a lot of the people that are building AI tools are building them around things they don't control. So they can't change the data set, they can't change the API. That, I guess, that expands your whole conversation, because it's like, actually, if we think about actions we want, but theoretically the AI and the pro portals take, how do we constrain them at the account level, at the device level, at the API level, so it can only do a subset of things, for example?
Yeah, definitely. And I think another interesting thing, there's that advantage, but I also think there's a large advantage with that we've found when going through different design practices of putting on those blinders. Like if we design this like I didn't have, that end-to-end view, that's how you call out your spots where you need to improve, right?
Mm.
Because an agent won't have that context. You have that context when developing it. But if I'm like, hey, if I just let's say I could just automate the portal UI, right? I could put an agent in front of it. Does it have all the context it needs to fix things, change things, you know, have the proper status, the proper guardrails? When I click this button, does it make sure I have the right RBAC checks that I'm allowed to click that button? So it's all the things we do for a user. And I think it's helpful not to personify AI, right? But to think about that workflow or those workloads like tier one agent, tier two agent, because customers want to control that. So if we look at it from that perspective of, hey, this is another role. It's maybe an automated role, but it is another role. We first start with that kind of like, hey, do we have the right context? Do we have the right controls? Is the right audit and visibility, right? If we were to put an AI agent in the portal, right, customers would obviously want to see those actions in the audit log, be able to apply RBAC to it. So I think there's also not knowing the background is also helpful and a good sanity check for us to make sure we have that context, make sure things are visible, transparent, intuitive as well.
Yeah, that's really really interesting to think about it as a role like any other role. And you say you immediately jump to like RBAC for the agent and audit log and knowing. I think from a product development point of view as well, like it's a bit like back in the day with Skype Business, as a partner, we'd be given like complete admin over it, which means it's great from a control point of view, but it also means you're on the hook for anything that goes wrong and guilty until proven innocent. And it'll be the same thing with the agents. It'll be like, well, it wasn't the team, it was the AI. So you have to have a pretty flawless audit log, I guess.
Yeah, and that's where we're really thinking about in terms of next steps, right? Chatbots are fun, very low risk, but then once you start exploring the realm of how much can you automate, you start really running into where the permission boundaries lie for us, our customers, and so on and so forth, and ensuring that design accommodates for that. So, and then that introduces new paradigms in terms of how do we interact with AI agents. It doesn't necessarily need to be a chat interface, right? So that becomes really interesting, not only thinking about the interaction model, but the permission model behind that too, to make sure that we're not overstepping boundaries, that the AI agent is, as Andrew described, respecting the guardrails, if you will, and but still able to provide value to the customer.
Awesome. So parking kind of proactive automation for a minute, there's a whole bunch of additional data sets that are interesting. Obviously, there's a bunch of usage information in there, and you've got access potentially to a whole bunch of logs and error messages and issues. I guess both some stuff that surfaces the Pro Portal, but back on the endpoints as well. Are those data sets you've considered? Because that feels like a good case for LLMs to kind of pull insights.
Yes, absolutely. Lot of data there, and that is absolutely on our roadmap to incorporate. Usage data is like a top ask. As a product manager, it was my top ask too. But we needed to start somewhere, right? So, and we are working on that and ensuring that the data analyst will be able to reason over that data. I don't know, Andrew, if you wanted to add more to.
Yeah, and I think it's fine to say at this point that it's something we're working on. I think the biggest challenge with usage data, first from a technical, like purely technical standpoint, is in our experience and our evaluation, LMs aren't very good at understanding time as a concept. So building the different tooling and context for it, it's one of those things that it's not a problem with a high level of complexity, but it requires a lot of tuning, right? Do I expose the right tools to be able to turn to even like, hey, what is today, right? That's a simple tool to add, but understanding, well, then things we do implicitly, like, hey, last week. Well, what does last week mean? Like it knows, but we need to give it tools to like calculate different times.
I can add a specific example, Andrew, right here. Is we had this exact issue for something as simple as, hey, what's the latest update for Teams rooms? Initially, the LLM was just conking on that answer because it was like, well, what is today? Well, and let's say I asked it today, it would be like, well, the latest update is this version from 2022. And it's like, well, yeah. So
probably because someone wrote latest in the doc at the time.
and even though actually that was an interesting problem because the documentation was up to date in terms of having the dates of like, oh, the latest update was in February of 2025. So why would you pull 2022?
Yeah, why would it end up halfway down?
It was referencing the correct doc as well, and then that's where that's actually a different problem that we encountered where it's like, no, the doc is fine, the LLM is just bad at understanding time.
Right.
That is interesting.
Yeah, and that's where like there's all these like to kind of explain the problem in patterns. It's like it's not complicated, right? We just give it some tools to understand time and to be able to like, hey, whenever you do anything with dates, use this to understand the difference and never do math yourself, those kind of things. So that is, itself is straightforward, but there's so much we do when you're building a general assistant that a lot of like, I'll give credit to a lot of all other generalized agents have really done, like your ChatGPT, your Anthropic, there's a lot of background tools that you don't know are being used to like, hey,
some of them
understand
you
this
see them
difference.
surface sometimes in the UI, like you'll see it, or if you expand the reasoning models, like they'll jump out to run some code to do the maths. So they've obviously been told to go do that, and same thing. You can see they must have built a whole bunch of supporting structure for like, this is today, this is what like this is how date ranges work. So so I guess you're having to do that structural stuff for your use case.
And there's a lot of balance between it, and this comes where it's like, hey, the technical part of it isn't super complicated, but where we spend a lot of time is on the evaluation and the constantly evolving models, right? is some models we can have essentially what they call code interpreter where it goes and use Python, but some they're not good at doing that in our evals, right? They're like, hey, I get my time, but to do, difference, I decided to do the math, right? And it changes model to model and also model version to model version. And so a lot of where that is like, hey, having the right amount of instructions, um, a novel thing too that's coming up with a lot of latest models is you can have too much instructions. You can tell it to do too much. And there's all these implicit things that you don't realize where you'll have conflicting instructions. And so recently a big thing we've done is move to like automated prompt tuning, and that's helped a lot. So we're not manually like tuning our prompts. But I think that will be an arms race with ourselves and kind of like the models as things evolve is like, hey, what is the right level of nuance? What are, as humans, when we reason, what are the things that we do implicitly that we don't realize? And time is one of those. Um, and then the other thing I was going to say, as far as um, less about the LM and more about even like we were talking about pulling in usage data, is the compliance part of it, right? Is being able to, we aggregate all this data to be able to do the knowledge for it, but exposing certain parts of it, understanding when something is then summarized, what parts of it can be exposed to the user and their roles, right? I may have access to MTR, but maybe I don't have access to all the other call sessions. Let's say, a CVP had joined that meeting room, and I want to know that the meeting room had a call, but I don't want my technicians to know that.
Yeah.
But I also want them to know that that room had a call. So being able to aggregate, it all comes back to RBAC. That should be a sticker. Be able to aggregate that kind of those roles and permissions and like, hey, what is the right level of summarization and thinking about compliance. And I know it sounds like everyone hears compliance and privacy and they're like, oh, that again. But it creates some really interesting technical challenges. And I
Yeah.
think for agents in general, that's going to be a huge, I think, frontier topic across the industry is when we think about permissioning and agents then getting information, does the agent have access to information? And then when if they aggregate, an answer from 10 different sources to you, do you have to have access to those different sources? When we then, if they take those 10 different sources, save it as new source of data, how do you propagate those permissions? How do you control that? And so I know we said, oh, just usage data, but it's really this complicated problem that we're really trying to
Yeah, no,
find
that's
the
good.
best kind of like balance to
Yeah, that's good
expose.
insight. I hadn't thought about that. Like
Yeah.
wanting to. Also, we talked at the top of the conversation about with the docs having a reference point for where the information came from. So, am I allowed a summary of the usage information, but I can't check the reference because I'm not allowed the depth of the information. But the LLM
Right,
got to that to give me the summary, so I can't validate the output as an example.
right.
Yeah, and the scope of the problem with usage data, or at least it might seem intuitively that it's like, oh, you've got this table of information, just go look at it. And it's like, no, it's not just that simple.
Yeah. So let me expand the challenge then, because you've also got with the beauty of MTRs and Teams devices, you've got interdependencies on Exchange and Intune. Like it's interesting that you're building a agent in the Pro Portal. Obviously, the M365 team are doing an agent in their admin portal. Different things are coming up from different teams. Is that just a factor of the reality of everybody's doing stuff at the moment, and those stuff there'll be some kind of A to A scenario, or they'll converge, or is that still up for
I'll
debate?
let Alvin do the PM one, and then I'll give the engineering spin on it.
Yeah, no,
Let's see if they
100%.
agree.
From a product management perspective, absolutely. I mean, at least my philosophy on it is no, I don't want a world of a billion agents that you have to, as a user, try to understand which one you want to invoke when and all that stuff. So, in terms of what is happening at Microsoft, yes, a lot of teams are running in parallel, running at light speed, if you will, just like us, trying to see and experiment even on our specific scenarios and use cases and get kind of our bread and butter going, and all the while trying to ensure that we're still talking to each other. So for example, in our case in particular, we have conversations, or at least I have conversations in parallel with the other teams to understand what they're doing. And so even a year ago when we started on this course, to build the AI assistant, we made very intentional and conscious decisions to be like, we're not going to stick our head in the sands and do this our own way, and not think about some feature world where we're totally integrated in, for example, the M365 Copilot, right? Because I do think we should absolutely be in a world where, you know, any agent can call us, right, in situ. So if I'm in Microsoft Admin Center, that I should be able to ask a Teams question, a Teams device management question, and get an answer from the, as I alluded to earlier, the subject matter expert agent
Yeah.
that's there. So kind of what you also snuck in there as well, referring A to A workloads. Absolutely, we're thinking about that. And so, obviously, even a year ago, we had to be very conscious about what that architecture looks like. And so, I think we've set ourselves up extremely well for those integrations in the future.
Yeah, it's nice to hear. Andrew, any thoughts from a technical point of view?
Yeah, and I think just to echo his original points is really the reason there were so many surfaces was because we all, I mean, the entire industry this last like 5 years has learned that with this kind of evolution, this little bit of a paradigm shift of how we're working, is you kind of have to start working on something that's not feasibly possible yet. So learning to lead your shop, so to speak, as you're building, and that causes people to build very fast. And there is definitely coordination risk with that. But I think where we're at a good point now is we're at a little bit of a place where the patterns are set, and then now this the quality is changing, right? So there's definitely some coordination there. Is like agents. My personal opinion. This isn't the opinion of anyone else. But in working with agents and working with other teams across other teams, is agents and their tooling. They're really just becoming our new like APIs, right? And like Alvin said, was when we plan our agents, we need to assume that agent's going to talk to a human, but also if that agent talks to another agent, is it equipped with the right, not to bring back to RBAC security, hey, does
Yeah.
this agent talking to me also have permission? Is this agent talking on behalf of someone else? Um, and building all of our tooling so really it can be more the society of agents, right? And I um, kind of see a future even now as we're developing this where an agent will talk to another agent who will know another agent, and we'll have kind of this network. Just like if you were to ask us, like I have a no problem I'm working on, I just lean over the person next to me, I'm like, hey, have you ran into this before? They're like, no, I haven't, but this person has, and they can talk to this, and then they connect us. And
Yeah, and MTR team talking to the Intune team, talking to the
yeah,
Exchange
yeah.
team, right? This is what we do today, just as people.
Yeah, and I think what's really nice about that approach versus having any sort of like Uber interface is the SMEs still control the context, right? Like going back to like you said, what's nice about the pro management portals, we understand devices, right? We work on devices. Coming back from the MR days, like we use MR to fully support all of our customers, right? It used to be this multi-tenant thing that we ran as a managed service, right? So we have a very close touch end to end. We understand that. And so it gives us the ability to instill that context without overloading the context. Just like, hey, if you go to ask someone a question, they don't know everything, but they have more depth, right? You don't want someone that has just a high level understanding of everything, because if you know everything, you're like, well, I saw this error code, but was it an Intune error code? Was it an AD error code? Was it like, you're like, oh, an AD is this. If it's Intune, this is how you'd go ask Intune. So it still keeps everything pretty succinct, and it's much more scalable,
I'd
and
say just from a
capability and
development point of
testing.
view, that kind of makes sense. Apart from anything else, is like you're going to want individual teams improving
Right.
their experience and not being hamstrung by like one giant thing shipping. So
Yeah.
actually, you can improve your agent experience, and everything benefits in the process as well.
Yeah. And even going back to like expanding it from more of a product side too, is I still think there is kind of a concept of you should abstract that, right? Like it's great that that works out from an engineering standpoint in the back end, but as a user, I don't want to have to remember the name of 12 different agents. I'm like, was it this agent that I mentioned, or was it this agent? So
Yeah.
I think there's also what I've seen um, start to change within our product, and not to speak in anything specific, but I like this direction, is understanding that difficulty as a user, right? As someone who uses ChatGPT, they don't. care about all the plugins that ChatGPT uses. They just ask ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
And then behind the scenes, you can have that kind of society or network. And so I think from, yes, it's great to have all of them talk together, but as a human, I still want one person to talk to. And so still think there will be within domains or organizations, I think there will be a convergence to a single like assistant agent, whereas in the back end, there'll be still the society and organizations will
Yeah,
still
that's the
focus on
primary
individual
user
agents.
interface. The user interface is
Yeah.
asking their like EA or PA or PM, and then they go and do all this hard work to pull all this information together, and they come
Yep.
back and look, here's I've got it all together for you.
Yeah, yeah. So I
Yeah.
think it's ever evolving, and I think there a lot of the product challenges are pretty closely intertwined with engineering challenges related to them, right? A lot of the things I talk about when we talk in this kind of fuzzy inference, when the world of prompting now, so much of it becomes, how do I want this respond to a user? Like, what is the behavior I want to drive here? And I think what's exciting about being an engineer in this time is like that's as much my problem as it is PM's, right? They have a certain outcome, but I'm like, hey, how do I communicate that to this like statistical model, right? If I
Yeah,
was to write this, like what is the right bounds? What is the person think about bounds and personality, and also like being responsible with my answers, right? Am I giving the right transparency? If I'm talking to another agent, is that transparency conveyed through that response to that agent? So I think there's a lot of open questions. It's still moving fast, but I feel us starting to converge to a much more kind of consolidated interface to that single model, while the back end of it starts to expand to kind of more the society of agents.
Yeah. And there's a lot of product considerations as well on this topic in general. It's like, from a pragmatic perspective and a product strategy perspective, one also has to consider taking external dependencies. So even though we see a world and we desire for the end goal here to be, a single interface so that users don't have to navigate the complexities themselves, but rather all of that kind of dissolves into the background. How do we achieve that, but also pragmatically not then saddle, for example, the M365 Copilot team with, hey, we're the pro management team. Can you build this for us? Can you do this? Can you do that?
yeah,
It's like, well, no, we also have accountability as a product. Like, well, we're the subject matter experts. Why would we expect the M365 Copilot team to then develop expertise? Right? And of course, there's a lot of collaboration that can happen there. But in some way, it's also scaling the expertise, scaling the skill sets to all of Microsoft, but not just at Microsoft, but holistically in the tech industry, having all these companies and teams, product teams, develop their own agents and such is really, I think, critical to scaling all of this. And protocols like MCP and so on and so forth make all that easier. Back to Andrew's comment about all of this just sounding like rebranded APIs, I tend to agree with that as well.
APIs with this error rate variance that we can't determine is interesting.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for awesome conversation. I think it's such an exciting space to be working in, and it's amazing, as you say, from where you started on the early models to where it's come now. And I think you said, Andrew, about you're kind of building with expectation that the models are going to get better, compute's going to get cheaper, more interesting things are going to happen. And I think particularly at Microsoft it's interesting because there's so many teams doing so many things with agents and agentic, like the knowledge sharing over the next few years to kind of bring that all together will be really exciting as well.
Yeah. And actually a hilarious final example closer of how rapidly things move. And Andrew can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but basically I would say 12 months to 8 months ago, we were building our own internal agent for doing the docs reasoning. So using RAG, we were building our own little agent, if you will, to go scrape docs, understand the question, so embedded, and then look for the right docs.
Yeah.
And then the docs team themselves released the knowledge agent or the knowledge API, I guess.
It's an index for us to use.
Yeah, an index for us to use like 6 months later, and we're like, well, that was like 6 months of work we didn't need to do. But great, I'm glad it's here. It's great. We'll use it. But it's like, oh man, that was a waste of 6 months of work.
Yeah. That's one of the dangers, like particularly with things moving as fast as they are now. But you can't stand still either, can you? You've got to do stuff.
Exactly, you can. And again, we're talking on the order of months. We're no longer even with the cloud computing space and before that, right? Like you had leeway of years, right, to work with in terms of things fundamentally shifting, or changes so large that you had to reconsider your architecture. Like obviously when you're talking about software in a box, then cloud computing, the lead times for that.
Major server versions every three
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, exactly. It got shorter and then shorter, and then now with the pace of things in AI development, it's like things can change drastically within even a month or two.
Yeah.
And so, closing thought on that is realistically, and especially my role as a PM, is to be really well attuned to what's happening, new developments, and Andrew's amazing at that as well.
To be okay with the plan changing every 3 months,
Right.
basically.
Right, but also being able to anticipate, some things you just can't anticipate because it just comes out of left field. But
Yeah.
ideally, you should be and this is where even in attending AI conferences internally and externally, a philosophy that I've heard a lot is, well, not a philosophy, but more a good product management or product development practice is to be like, you can't build for what's even coming in the next month or whatever. You really have to be anticipating what are the groundbreaking things and research that are happening that is probably going to come out in a year and develop for that. So it's like you really have to shoot forward and anticipate and see around the corner, because it may make whatever you're working on today just obsolete. Like what happened to prompt engineering?
Right.
Yeah. It turns out the AI was better at that than us. Who knew?
Exactly.
True.
Everybody was like, "Oh, I need to be a prompt engineer," and it's like six
not
months
so much.
later.
And
Six
to
months
end on
later,
that
oh,
too, I
one comes
remember,
out.
Alvin, just a fun anecdote is when we were thinking of some of this data analyst stuff that now we do and it's almost boring. I remember when we were playing a year ago talking to Alvin, I'm like, Alvin, that's not unrealistic enough. Like we have to shoot a little higher than
Yeah.
that, right? And we ended up undershooting. And I think that's just a good example of even as like culturally and as we develop professionally, right? We change the way we think. And AI, for as much as people is like, hey, whatever opinion you take on AI changing, whether it's good at software engineering or not, um, coupled with the capabilities changing, like even a service I've been working on the last month or so, um, that for the semester is like I've rewritten it 3 or 4 times now because like, hey, this framework changes or this model, GPT-5 was huge for agents, right? For a user, it wasn't a big deal. Like I think like, hey, if you're using ChatGPT, you don't see a difference. But models, even over the last couple of months, their ability to just follow directions dramatically changed how we did things, even in a couple of months. So we're like, well, we couldn't do this before, let's rewrite it. But now that they follow directions with AI, we're now finding that even I'm writing, I'll find this funny. I write specs more now to write code than I do the code itself. It's like defining the bounds, defining the requirements, and then we're shifting towards a world where I see code as just a compiled spec for how I'm designing. Right? Is the design good? Is the requirements good? Do I have the right pattern? Do I have the right context? Right
Yeah.
requirements? And so PM, I also see PM and engineering becoming closer and closer in discipline as we move towards that world,
We're just all going to be
along with being
working,
more fast.
PM
Yep.
and engineering just working together to write the perfect spec sheet to feed to Codex or Claude Code or whatever the model is of the day, and it'll be like, "There's the code." Oh no, I didn't
I
rewrite
mean,
the
it sounds
spec.
like a joke, but you're not far off. That's if I look at my development over the last like 6 months, that's pretty much what it's looked like.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for a great conversation. We'll definitely, have you back. I know there's some stuff coming at Ignite as well, so for people listening in, look out for that news. But thanks so much, guys. Really interesting conversation, and we definitely have to do it again soon.
Definitely,
Thank
definitely.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
But by the way, I don't know if did you have a high stop? There was one closing thing that I was thinking if we should mention,
Oh yeah,
and
go on
that
if you want.
is because a lot of people ask like, "Man, is AI going to replace my job?" And it's a
Well,
thought
it
that I
sounds
have.
like as long as you can write really good spec sheets, you're all right.
Yeah, no, it actually, even for something like the AI assistant, right? Some people might see it as, oh, are they trying to build something that can just do my job? And then, the era of
Oh, interesting. From like an IT ops point of view.
yeah, from an IT ops point of view, hopefully somewhere in the future someone isn't having like a pitchfork and be like, those two guys, they replaced my job. Right? No, and I think it's important to cover that there is actually that actually becomes a philosophy of, are we building AI agents to replace humans? And realistically, I think, especially from what I've seen and hopefully what Andrew's seen, I don't think it really replaces people. It replaces some of the
I don't think you find many people in IT ops saying we're swimming in time and there's nothing to do here. So of all the verticals or all the subsets of verticals, IT ops is one of the one where anybody I talk to is like, yeah, I could happily have some assistance here. So I think
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
and I think
So my philosophy on it is, especially when I think of the scenarios and things that we want to tackle with AI, it's not about replacing jobs. It's really about replacing the tasks that we don't want to do. Like in our day-to-day jobs, right? Even my day-to-day jobs, writing an email or writing a very well-crafted, sometimes very sensitive text, like instant message over Teams or email, requires a lot of times. There have been days where I've spent an hour being very deliberate about every single word, comma, period.
Is Andrew that touchy when you change the requirements? Is that what it is?
Right, exactly. And now an LLM can help me, shorten that iteration cycle down to seconds, right, instead of minutes. And so I'm thinking that's where we're seeing leaps and bounds in efficiency, and that's what we plan to bring to the table for admins, especially in this context. Is what are the tasks that we can alleviate? Because there's a lot of mundane tasks of, for example, like, oh man, I got to go extract the logs, download it, open it up, read it. You scroll, and be like, okay, what am I looking for? What am I?
Yeah, I feel like of all the audiences, the people in ops are the first ones to take any help they can take.
yeah. And when I talk to it, I think the one thing it always comes back to, like if I was to summarize up everything we just say, is we really want to eliminate toil, right? Like you said, there's no one's ever worried about having like too much time but if you're doing the same thing over and over again, that's not providing value to you for professional development. It's not something, well, I mean, outside of like, people who like really good routine, like it's, oh, yay, I get to look at another sign-in log this morning. No one's really like saying
Yeah.
that. But I mean, get into a world where, hey, we can eliminate that toil, we can eliminate that repetition, and we can really free up room for, IT admins and engineers to really start being creative and start being like forward thinking and focus on optimization and more creative workflows, things that they're inherently good at but never have time to do. It's like, oh, I should set up monitoring on this system, or like, oh, it'd be great if I documented this. The
Yeah.
things why we never have documentation, right? There's never that time, right? So really essentially just give people that space to be able to invest in their environment in a proactive way.
Awesome. Oh, again, thanks so much, guys. Really interesting conversation, and I'm excited to see how it develops over the coming year.
Definitely.
Awesome.